Welcome back to another And Now for Something Horrible, where we talk about all the terrible things in nature and entomology. Today I wanted to talk about lice. And not the, annoying head lice that you might be familiar with from your school days, where little kids who don't wash well enough tend to spread little critters amongst each other's hair. I wanted to talk about body lice, which honestly is basically just a modified head louse, but they're extremely important in history and world events and human health. And you may not have thought about it very much. So this guy here is a human, a human body louse, not to be directly confused with a human head louse, although they are kind of the same species. The human body louse is Pediculus humanus, or corporeus, and then the head louse is Pediculus humanus capitis. And generally they're pretty indistinguishable, but they have evolved separately in that in nature they won't crossbreed because they have totally different environments. The head louse will stick to the head 99% of the time, and the body louse will stick below the neck 99% of the time. You can force them to interbreed in the lab, but in nature, they never will. And they are kind of associated with different issues. So generally speaking, in the West, we associate the head louse with just an annoying childhood issue. It's considered gross, but it's not considered particularly serious. But the body louse is a whole other issue. And again, speaking of body lice, this is not to be confused with the crab louse, which is or the pubic louse, which is the STD that you might be familiar with. That is an entirely different, I think, different genus. But lice in general or these kinds of lice, were once considered the Theraptera, order Theraptera. I believe now there's just Sequoia, so it's like all of the lice are combined. But they're obligate parasites, and they are blood feeders. The head louse and the body louse. And the problem with the body louse being a blood feeder is that it spreads terrible disease. So the body louse, that's what you have here, this Pediculus humanus, it reproduces fairly quickly and will infest any hair on the body. They feed up to 5 times a day. They can live for up to 30 days. The females lay something like 300 eggs over the course of her lifetime, and it doesn't take long for each egg to develop into an adult. So N1, N2, N3 refers to nymphal stage. So nymph 1, nymph 2, nymph 3. And then you have the adult stages over here, the male and female. This whole process from nymph to adult can be done in as fast as 9 days. And egg hatching takes maybe another 9 days. So every 18 days you have a full life cycle going on. So they are very, very quick. They are very, very quick to reproduce. They infest very quick. They infest extremely rapidly. And unfortunately, because they're blood feeders, they are capable of spreading diseases to people. And the one that is most concerning is epidemic typhus. So epidemic typhus. There are many kinds of typhus in the world, but epidemic typhus is probably the one that is most concerning in history. It's the one that has the highest body count by far. And it's the one that if you read any sort of historical accounts, when people are talking about like trench fever or jail fever, things like that, they're talking about this disease, epidemic typhus. So for a long time, no one really knew what spread epidemic typhus because we didn't have germ theory for a long time. But even after we had germ theory, it took a while to realize that these guys were spreading epidemic typhus. And that was discovered by this guy here, Charles Nicole, Frenchman, who realized that the disease could be spread between infected patients both in and out of hospitals. And he figured it out because it was their clothing that was spreading it. And he was like, well, how is their clothing spreading it? Because this is what the clothing looks like. All of these little things here are louse eggs. And it will be in the seams of your clothing, the seams of your bedding. And this is how they get between bodies. So he figured it out, and this was a huge deal because now that we know epidemic or how typhus is being spread, you can do something about it. So historically, epidemic typhus is a huge issue in wartime, and there are several distinct battles or wars where more people died from these little lice than from actual war or actual combat or wounds received in combat. So in the earliest recording of this disease is like the Granada War with Spain and the Moors, where the Spanish suffered 3,000 casualties from battle and 17,000 casualties from typhus. And the reason that this is spread is it's not from the bites per se, but these guys are blood feeders. And they bite onto humans to get their little blood meal, and they have typhus in their digestive tract. And so then they feed, and it causes them to defecate. And because they've bitten you, now you get itchy. And then you scratch your wound and you rub the feces, the infected feces, into your own wound. And that is how you become infected by this epidemic typhus. And typhus itself takes a while to show up. So you'll be infected for several weeks before you start having symptoms. But when you have symptoms, you'll eventually be covered in head-to-toe rash. You'll have high fever and vomiting, and eventually it infects your brain, and it causes severe brain swelling and can kill you. In fact, it has about a 40% mortality rate. So after Charles Nicolle discovered that this is how this is happening, militaries started taking notice because this was such a huge problem. For instance, Napoleon's invasion of Russia, he likely lost that not from starvation, but from epidemic typhus and trench fever. Epidemic typhus caused millions of deaths during World War I, caused hundreds of thousands, if not millions of deaths in World War II. It's a huge, huge problem for militaries because this disease spreads when you have a lot of people in close contact with each other, like in barracks and trenches. And it also spreads when you're in really terrible conditions, when you can't bathe regularly, when you can't wash your clothes regularly, because these lice build up in your clothing and on your body, and it's terrible. So military started to combat these lice through anti-typhus campaigns, where they would put up these posters trying to explain how typhus is spread, that civilians and military people can fight this through bathing and cleaning. And then also the development of anti-lice powders. Generally, these are considered like, or these were like the DDT powders, which are now illegal in most countries. But you would just douse people in DDT powder in order to kill all of the lice that were on them. This was extremely common during World War II, these delousing stations. I know that in Italy, when the Americans arrived, one of the first things that they did was begin delousing Italian towns because you had to stop the constant spread of this epidemic typhus in these towns that were on the front of the invasions. These are photos from. This is a photo from the U.S. military. These men all have epidemic typhus. This is from World War II, and they basically become bedbound because of how ill they are. Luckily, we do have a vaccine for epidemic typhus, although it is not publicly available. But militaries do use it, and also the more common method is through just lice control. So you need to control the little critters spreading this horrible disease so all of your men don't die, because it's much more likely that these lice will kill you than an enemy bullet will. And as well as once upon a time, at least like with Ellis Island, you had all immigrants coming in had to be checked for lice in order to prevent the spread of epidemic typhus within cities. Because again, if these people were on a ship for the last however many weeks, the likelihood that you could spread these lice within those sorts of conditions is really, really high. And epidemic typhus was extremely common then. Nowadays, it's not as common because we have antibiotics, because we have a lot of pesticides. Generally in the West, we have fairly good bathing regimens, and we wash our clothes a lot. Your dryer at home, your washing machine and dryer, the dryer specifically is really good for killing these things because your clothes are dried on really high heat. So instead of like line drying like you used to do in the old days, you do high heat drying, which is really good for sterilizing your clothes. And as well, you might wash your clothes in boiling water, things like that, like really, really hot water from your hot water tank. So there's a lot of things that we do now that control for epidemic typhus by controlling for these lice. So you don't really have to think about it. Now, when we think of lice, we think of a gross inconvenience, but we aren't worried about basically having a 40% death rate and succumbing to this horrible disease. So now you know about human lice, and so you can worry about this next time you or someone you know has head lice. Talk to you later.